Te mana whenua o tēnei rohe, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. E ka mana, e ka reo, e ka haue whā, tēnā tātou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Welcome to this, the meeting of the Civic Affairs Committee on Tuesday, May the 16th. Earlier, I acknowledged the breath of life, the mana whenua nations of Kaitahu, Katimamoe, Waitaha, Hawea, Rabuwai, in whose rohe, ancestral domain, we are so fortunate to live, love, work and play in and learn. And I acknowledged e ka mana, all the authorities, ka reo, the voices, and ka haue whā, us of the four directions. So to elaborate on that welcome and acknowledgement, I particularly acknowledge members of the public in the room, or those who may be watching on live stream, community board members, the CEO and all her staff, and DCC colleagues. And I'll offer a karakia timataka which summons from all directions the Mauri ora, or universal energy, to infuse and enrich us all. Tūtaua mai ruka, tūtaua mai raro, tūtaua mai roto, tūtaua mai waho, kia tau i te Mauri ora, te Mauri tū, ki te katoa, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. There is no public forum. However, we have apologies from Councillor Ackland and Councillor Vandervis, so I'm very happy to move that those be accepted. Thank you, Councillor Walker, for seconding, and I'll support it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. We're moving on to item 3, the confirmation of the agenda, and I'm very happy to move that the committee confirms the agenda without addition or alteration. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Lucas. I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Abstentions? Thank you very much. That is carried. Declarations of interest. I assume there's been no changes since this morning, so I'll move that the committee notes the elected members' interest register attached as attachment A and confirms the proposed management plan for elected members' interests. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mayhem. I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Those against? Abstentions? Thank you. I declare the motion carried. Item 4, confirmation of minutes. That's page 14 of our order papers. 5.1 Civic Affairs Committee meeting of 6th of March 2023. I move that the committee confirms the minutes of the Civic Affairs Committee meeting held on 6th of March 2023 as a correct record. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Gary. I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour say aye, please. Aye. Those against? Abstentions? Thank you very much. That is carried. Part A, reports. The Community Board Forum, page 17 of your order papers, and I welcome Ms. Ange McElwain, Chair of the West Harbour Community Board, to speak. And she will have 15 minutes, and then followed by questions. Welcome. The floor is yours.
We'll do that. Okay, well, as unaccustomed as I am to public speaking, here we go. Good afternoon. I'm Angela McLean and I'm Chair of West Harbour Community Board. I've been a member since 2004 and missed one term in between. So I've been there for quite some time. And there's been a lot of issues that over the years have surfaced and things that we need to continue to be done. And I suppose it's always an ongoing thing. There are some things that take longer than others to have that. And so I'm just going to start with the fact that who's been to Port Chalmers recently, excluding Steve and Mandy? And yeah, because you live in West. Anybody been there? Oh, goody. Okay, that's good, because a lot of people don't sort of think it's a long way away, and it's really not. And I know when I worked at council and I said I was moving to Port Chalmers, the people in the department all went, "What? That's ridiculous. What are you going there for?" But the fact is that it's actually very close, and it's actually a very popular destination in all sorts of manners. It's a very unique suburb, very unlike any other suburb in Dunedin, for several reasons, including the shared path, which will be completed soon, and Port of Otago, which is at the end of the street. Starting with the shared path, the impending completion of our very unique and special shared path, everybody's safe access between Port Chalmers and the city and vice versa. That'll be cyclists, people on mobility scooters, people who are walking, that's probably me, and anybody else who wishes to come down to port to experience the different things that you can do. And I'm expecting quite a lot of children to do that when they want to come and go to the fishing wharf in Keary's Bay, which we were very lucky that Port Otago provided. However, this also means that increased use in our public toilets. Bad word, I know. We have 2 at Keary's Bay near the fishing wharf, thanks to Port Otago. We have 2 at the library, 5.5 days a week. And we also have 2 on the main street, just up from the supermarket. So really, while it sounds a lot, it's not a lot. These are used by locals, and they're absolutely inundated in the cruise season, which usually runs from October to April or May. It seems to be extending a little bit now. It used to be October to March. So that means that lots and lots of people come and visit us, and a lot of them need to go to the toilet. And that includes the crew and also other tourists that are coming to visit us over the summer months. But this will mean this year, since the shared path will have been opened in the next few months, that there's going to be an increase in people travelling to port in other methods, cycling, mobility scooters, walking, whatever, they're going to come. And the thing is that they're actually also going to need to go to the toilet. We're really thankful that there's going to be a toilet at St Leonard's, which is about the halfway mark, but the rest of the path is now going to be completed at a huge cost. We're very lucky, and we want to request council to consider increasing the number of public toilets in Port Chalmers. And this isn't just for the locals do use them, but it's also, we have one at the supermarket too for the locals too, but it's also for the cruise ship passengers and the incoming shared path people, because in the summer months it's actually going to be pretty chaotic, I reckon. We've got, we're going to have the shared path users all year round and the locals, but also the cruise ship passengers in the summer. There'll be around about 130 ships coming in this coming season, 23-24. It's changes, sometimes weather can change that or what have you, but generally there are around about 200,000 people that come in through Port Otago into the little village of Port Chalmers. We also ask that while you increase, I guess, the budget to allow for an additional toilet for us, that it would actually be good where the railhead ends, which is going to be the Whitcliffe Terrace rail crossing. That crossing is really unique. Apparently it's the only one of its kind in the country. And so they are going to put barriers up sometime, but it is basically the beginning of Port Chalmers. So we'd like to encourage people to come to that point and then actually walk up the main street and not create more traffic chaos than we already have. So we have a lot of it. And so we would actually also like to encourage council to give consideration to bike stands. We're going to need them. We want them to walk up the main street, we really don't want them cycling up the main street, because that's not going to be so good. So I think that's another consideration, is something like cycle, like bike places to put your bike and stuff like that, because we're going to have a lot of people coming, and in the summer months it's going to be reasonably busy. And I noticed, 3 times a week when I go past in St Leonard's, that there's sometimes up to 10 cars in the car park in the morning. People are cycling to work wherever they're going, but they are using it, and it's usually very popular, and that's sort of fluid throughout the day. Okay, well, so that's toilets and bike stands, which are 2 things that we really do need. And I guess the thing is that we're kind of unique, because nobody else has 200,000 visitors coming to their suburb each summer. So we are the gateway to Dunedin, and I've been saying that for a very, very long time. When I worked in the visitor centre back in the 80s, they sent me to Australia to say it at Expo. I've been pushing it for a very long time, because the thing is that Port Chalmers is where people first came, where the settlers came to. And it's been such a long time. We've had local government in Port since 1860. We've had a total of 21 mayors. And from 1989, of course, we've been part of Greater Dunedin. And I know with Mosgiel, when I worked at council, and the Mosgiel people used to whinge and moan that, they've basically got a worse deal. But our area never said that. Not directly anyway, that I'm aware of. But it's always been, now it's part of Greater Dunedin, because the first settlers have been here and arriving in 1844, but now they come in a different way, and they don't stay forever, they just go away at the end of the day. Port Chalmers is now a popular destination for visitors, not just people off ships. We see people in camper vans, or cramper vans as I like to call them. We see people on cycles, motorbikes, tricycles, all sorts of things coming to port. Just have a look, go for lunch, have a look around the area, and go to Aramoana. And over to Orokonui, actually, as well. The last cruise season we had around about 200,000 passengers and crew, and that's going to continue to operate like that. It's only going to increase, and I actually feel there's probably a point where we can't have them every day of the week, and it's getting to that stage. Sometimes you have 2 a day. There's more people coming in up the harbour than is the population of the whole of the West Harbour. So one of the issues we have now that's impacted on the community from passengers who, due to the cost of the shuttle to Dunedin, they choose to take the local bus. And I've got a couple of photos of this, because it was any day of that was a ship-in, you would actually see this. So you can, if you'd like to pass this around, Steve, there's 2 of each one. The cost of the cruise ship shuttle. And hundreds are choosing to use it. You've got Australian people who are actually New Zealand citizens and retired, so they've got gold cards, they can do it for free. But also, while I realise the regional council provide the local bus, we need your help. We need your help to get the cruise companies and encourage the cruise companies and the regional council, the eyesight, to encourage people to use the shuttles. But to do that, they need the price to drop. It always used to be around about $20, $25 return. This last season it was $30 US return, and in some cases $30 each way US. That's a lot of money when you can get on the public bus for $1.50. So that's something that we'd like Enterprise Dunedin and the eyesight to actually lobby for us to get that price reduced. I know they've had 3 years with COVID, and they're probably trying to make up for that, but that's not something we could have controlled. So they really need to bring that price down and get people back on the shuttle buses. Even better would be lobbying for a train to act as a shuttle. That would be great, because the line is there. We have the first line that was ever built here, and that would be a really good thing to do. So yeah, it used to work really well, not working well now. As you can see, there are hundreds of people who queue for the bus, and this is only at one of the 2 bus stops. The other bus stop is the same. So it's just such an ongoing problem. People are missing, like local people are missing medical appointments at the hospital, job interviews, they're not making it to school or to work on time. If they get on the bus, they usually don't have a seat. There's supposed to be so many seats put aside for locals, but the visitors don't really care about that. So while they're all very nice people, they're on holiday. They've got holiday brain. So I think it's something that we need to have a joint sort of thing where we talk to the regional council, where council gets involved in helping us to try and get that to be a more functional service like it used to be. It used to work no problem. And one of the biggest problems was that now, this last season, they haven't let the train onto the wharf to pick up the people who have booked the train from the ship. The Freedom people normally would go on the shuttle, but the people who booked through the ship used to get picked up off the wharf. And that's hundreds of people. But now those people are all rushing to catch the city bus so they can get to town, like the people paying less than them, and jump on the train. So Kiwi Rail haven't been particularly useful in that respect, and we really need that as an issue to be solved as well. We've got a train line, first one that was built in Dunedin. The Polish settlers came here especially to do that. It was 150 years ago in December. So we really should make use of it more than we do. Okay, this is causing a lot of stress and a lot of anti-cruise ship feeling in the community. And I mean, the port is the parking space. You know, some days it looks like there are 2 new buildings in port, not just one. Steve. And that's not even a big ship. Some of them look even bigger. Okay, so the other thing about this is that we've been lucky with Port Otago. They've put up baskets and flower baskets and put out some planters and, you know, stop people actually crossing the main road through the intersection because it's particularly dangerous. But the Port of Otago is the space where cruise ships park, and they come through port, and port is looking a bit shabby. Port needs to be look more inviting. It's the first place that all cruise ship passengers see. It needs some love from council. Luckily, Port Otago have put up the flower baskets and what have you to encourage people, but the trouble is that people in the local businesses are feeling that they're not getting much, or if anything, of the benefit of having that thing parked at the end of the road. What we get is the bus congestion. You see shuttle buses going into town empty, which seems ridiculous when there's like 200 people standing at the bus stop. So we'd like to sort of encourage council to consider bringing forward the upgrade of our main street. It's sort of been put off, but it's kind of there in the background and it's in the system. But if we're going to continue to have these numbers of people coming here, we want them to write on Travel Advisor and whoever else, TripAdvisor, that it's a great place and go there. We do find lots of people have come back more than once, and they're the people who don't go into town because they say, oh, I've been there, you know, I'm just going to stay here and go for a walk and, you know, do a bit of shopping, what have you. And they sometimes hitch up to the Orokonui Eco Sanctuary. So I think our main street needs a bit of love and it needs to look a bit better. And the thing to consider is the fact that coincidentally it's also called George Street. So that's important. Okay, lastly, I'm going to talk about the Aramoana Playground. Thank you very much. The destination playground at Aramoana is fantastic. It's really popular, especially in the weekends. However, there's always a however. The village of Aramoana now has a parking problem. Due to the popularity of the playground, people now come from all over the town to use the playground, which is making the adjacent street really busy. It turns it into basically a one-way if you've got a really small car to go down the middle. And that's not very safe. It's like parking chaos. Everybody's outside on the road, stretching round. It's not a big place, Aramoana. If you haven't been there for a while, go and have a look at the playground and have a look at the street and the domain, because they've got a real problem when it comes to using the playground. It's a great playground. People love it. But the reality is the parking is a nightmare. And it's only going to get worse, given that summer is not far away, I like to think. So the board would like, and the community, and we support the community in wanting this, we'd really like the domain to be used better and to have more parking space made available. There is parking when you go in the gate on the left. You could put down a gravel space and get the cars off the road, which would actually be a lot safer for the children who use the playground. And that would take pressure off the road. And it would actually finish off the facility, because really parking was possibly not thought about as being an issue, because they thought only the kids in Aramoana would use it, but that is not the case. People from all over town are using that playground. Okay, well, apart from traffic chaos in Port and at Aramoana, that's me.
Councillor Walker, sorry.
Thank you. Hi. I'm just checking I heard you right. Did you suggest that George Street from Whitcliffe Terrace, from where the train crossing the rail crossing is, to close the street off from there, that people would have to park up and put their bikes somewhere as well and then walk in? Is that what you were proposing?
Not to close the street, but to provide them with somewhere to put their bikes so they can walk up the main street. And because we've got enough traffic now, there's a continual stream of container trucks and logging trucks Monday to Friday. In the summer, that will continue during the week, and you'll have people arriving by bike, and a lot more of them.
So it's just an option, like it won't be closed off and you can't get through?
No, but it will be when Kiwi Rail finish whatever they've been doing down at the crossing and the barriers arrive, it will stop the traffic, which is really good. Because at the moment, and it's been like this for years, and I've been standing there with Kiwi Rail when this has happened, we've complained about the fact that where the white stick is when you look up the train line towards Port, that's supposed to be where the bells go off. But normally the train's well in the picture before the bells go off, which is actually pretty terrifying sometimes when you're crossing the crossing and there's a train. So the barriers hopefully will stop that, as long as they come down soon enough before the train actually comes through. So the street will remain open, and the fact that it's a suburban road that's going onto a state highway is apparently very unusual, and they've written papers about it and had conferences and what have you.
That barrier would be on Whitcliffe Terrace though, wouldn't it?
Yes, it will be. Yep.
Councillor Walker?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ange, for coming in and your mahi over so many years. A few questions. I'll start, I guess, with toilets. You'll be aware, obviously, in the 10-year plan, we have a 10-year plan of toilets and where they're built, and you'll be aware that Purukanui is in there. I'm assuming that I don't know if you didn't mention it, but you're keen for that to stay where it is on the current list?
Absolutely. Yep, Purukanui has needed a toilet for a very long time, and they have had a temporary one periodically in the summer for the fun day. But, we have been told in the past by council, why can't you use the one at Long Beach? Well, you want to take a teenager or a child over there that's busting to go to the toilet, up the hill, round the corner, down the hill, and around to Long Beach. I think they'll have a problem before they get there.
Thank you. And I'm sure you can imagine with a large city, we have a lot of pressure from lots of areas deeming or suggesting that there are areas in need of a toilet. is it something the board might do at the long-term plan next year to come and speak to us to encourage us perhaps to look at increasing the funding that's currently there?
Oops, I think so. I think that some communities don't have toilets, I accept that, but most communities don't have 200,000 visitors visiting them in the summer for like 7 or 8 months of the year. And that causes added problems on its own. People queuing for the toilet, one of them breaks down, it gets locked until it's fixed, then we're one down. You know, it's a unique situation that doesn't occur anywhere else in the city. And, you know, like I think a lot of people, if they're really desperate, some places they go and knock on someone's, you know, shop door and say, excuse me. If they're desperate, you know, they go to the nearest one if they can find one. But this is totally unique. I mean, on a busy day in Port, you've got a queue for the toilet, you've got a queue for the bus, you've got a queue for the ATM machine. It runs out of money regularly. The toilet often needs to be closed off because it needs fixing, something's gone wrong. So, yeah, it's like being in a resort just down the road from Dunedin City.
Thanks. And just so I guess on the 200,000, obviously being a local there, is there anybody who keeps stats on what percentage, because many people off the ships don't ever come into port, unfortunately or fortunately for you, what percentage of the 200,000 actually step foot in port? Are there any stats?
I'm sure that it's something I need to catch up on with the people at Port Otago, because I think there are people who don't get off the ship. They're on the ship because that's what they want to be doing. They're not cruising to go to places. They're cruising because they like the ship. I had lunch on the Nordum, I think, one year, and it was amazing the number of people who were actually still on board. And we were lucky because they said, oh, make yourselves at home, you know, what have you. And so we talked to people up by the pool and said, why are you still here? Oh, you know, there were all sorts of reasons why people didn't get off. And I would say Port Otago probably have a reasonable feel for that, and I would really like some information about the numbers. But, you know, realistically, if they charged them $1 each, we'd probably get a new public toilet. It's not a cheap thing to provide, but it's very necessary.
Thank you. My final question, I guess, is around the bike stands, and I ask this from being a daily cyclist and being in that fraternity, and we're all very weird. Take my word for that. My question is the demand for bike stands before something's completed. So my question would be, wouldn't it be wiser to see the path completed, understand the habits, and then perhaps the bike stands could be part of the street upgrades request that you've made already, and money is already in the long-term plan for centres upgrades. So it's sort of not putting the cart before the horse.
I think so. That's, you know, but I do think we will need some. There are some on the main street. There's one outside the library, those sort of round pipe things, and, you know, and I know a lot of people look at them and go, what are they for? But then they see a bike against it. So, I think it's something we will need, definitely. Maybe not straight away, but the fact is summer's coming and everybody's going to be very excited to come and try the new shared path that we've put up with 3 years of roadworks to have. So it's going to be soon.
Okay, thank you. I'm worried about your optimism that summer's about to arrive.
Look outside. 17
Tēnā
degrees
korua,
today.
thank you both. We have Councillor Wiley, followed by Deputy Mayor Barker, Councillor Gary and Councillor Weatherall. Kia ora.
Thank you. Miss Elaine, when I'm aware of Port Otago and the cruise ship as Chair of Economic Development, I'm also aware the cruise debrief meeting that took place a couple of weeks ago, buses were a hot topic at that as well. Have you had any feedback from Port Otago around, one, I understand the train is going to be accessing the wharf next season?
Haven't heard that yet. I will have a chat to Kevin and find out what's happening, because I know Barbara from the board went to the debrief and, asked a few questions and stuff. So I'm not sure what's come out of that. I hope the buses and a solution is one of them.
And just confirm, the Port Otago nor anything to do with the city was related to the train not being able to access the wharf this past season.
It certainly didn't help. I mean, you've got, probably 5 or 6 carriages of tourists that off the ship who flock to the local bus stop because they don't want to pay for the shuttle, and yet they can afford to pay $200 to go on the train.
Okay, but I understand the issue with the train was a Kiwi Rail issue, not a DCC, not an Enterprise Dunedin, not a Port Otago.
Sorry, definitely. Kiwi Rail at the best of times not very useful.
And then with the buses to town, have you had any update from Port Otago, because they have a very strong relationship with the cruise ships that are coming to town, and the relationship of how each cruise ship manages the shuttle bus service is again a private arrangement and not anything to do with ORC or DCC.
The cruise line books the shuttle buses and they set the price, but the Port Otago are the parking space basically. They provide security, some staff and somewhere to tie up your ship. But I think everybody's got a responsibility to make sure that Port Chalmers doesn't get inundated, and the residents don't get really anti having cruise ships in town, because they've been coming for a long time and they'll carry on coming. Yeah,
I'm very aware of that because I was the Dunedin Host Cruise representative back in 2011, and we had the problem back then as well. So I'll follow that up with the Enterprise Dunedin team as well. The other aspect I look at is what I have seen in Port Chalmers is the growth of the cruise ship market and how that has interacted with the passengers and the numbers going through there, and the importance actually that has had in the community. Do you have anything else to add to that?
A lot of people would say that only a certain part of the community actually gets a benefit. Like just walking up the main street and dropping into a cafe or going to a shop. Some of these people are small. They can't really afford to advertise. They do get good reviews in some of the books from staff who've shopped there. But yeah, it's the push that they want everybody to get on a bus and go to town, and we're basically just the parking space. We'd like some more benefit from having those parked at the end of the street.
Deputy Mayor Barker.
Thank you, Chair, and kia ora. So I'm sure you're aware that the council used to have a cruise action plan which addressed a huge amount of these issues. Are you aware if that's been updated since 2015?
Not that I've heard of, no.
So you have no interaction with a cruise action group or anything? Because I think this would address a lot of the issues.
No, not specifically. When I managed the volunteers, which I did for 12 years or something like that, we were involved in more discussions with council and, with the eyesight and what have you, as it sort of developed on the wharf, and Port Otago built the building instead of having the crappy old tents that we had for years. That sort of all fall away, really.
So would you like us to fast track putting together a cruise action plan again?
Definitely.
And my next question is just around, we've been doing a destination plan, and that's been consulting over the last couple of years. So has the West Harbour Community Board been involved in some of that consultation and put some of these issues forward, or had the chance to? There were three of us at the meeting recently at Port. It was like a Monday night or something like that, and probably almost as many staff as public. Just the timing, I suppose, because it was at 5:30 and I don't get away from work until 5:30. So
it was interesting in looking at the way that we use the different parts of the city. And if you drew a map around Port Chalmers, the whole of the West Harbour is like a community, basically, and that's why people like to live there. And you've got this piece in Port Chalmers which has got a almost completely different function for about 7 or 8 months of the year, which the locals have to work around.
So are you feeling that you're not really getting a place to talk about destination management for Port Chalmers?
Yeah, I think we should be in the process a lot more, because the fact is that all those people that come in up the harbour, first thing they see is the church. Oh, look, let's go there. Then they get on a bus, go to town. They might go to the church when they come back. But the fact is that we don't have much input into the whole process of people being able to enjoy the whole city, and not just, come into town and go shopping and then go back to the ship and eat lunch.
So my last question is just around cycling and walking consultation, which apparently has happened recently, because you've just mentioned that there's going to be increased traffic on the shared pathway and that you want some bike stands as well. So did you have the opportunity to be part of that cycling and walking consultation and give your feedback about the needs there?
Not recently, no.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for coming along. I wanted to know, and you'll be able to explain this given you manage the volunteers. I know there's some very passionate volunteers there, and manaakitanga is expressed through that work. Can you tell us you've told us about the issues, and I was alarmed to hear sort of an anti-cruise ship feeling creeping in, but how does the community there express manaakitanga to these visitors?
I guess the thing is that, the people who have shops, and they welcome them and they always chat to them, but a lot of the people we obviously don't see. And they're not going to go, ooh, you're a cruise ship person and what have you, but the thing is that they are very welcoming and, help people if they need help. No, you can't change money here, but look, I'll do this for you, and the supermarket does it. And yeah, basically, they're very accommodating and very welcoming, but, they don't get the chance to do a heap of it, really. I think they'd like to.
And what about your volunteers?
The volunteers at this stage, I'm not sure what's going on there. Some of my volunteers that I had, about 20 of them, I used to have most seasons, about 20, 25. Only 3 of them went and got involved this year. One of them walked out in disgust. And I did hear a rumour they were paying Port Otago staff to do it, so I don't know what's going on there.
And I heard you make a passing comment about connection to Orokonui, that there is, you said about hitchhiking there. Is there no connection on cruise ship days to Orokonui?
There is a tour, I think, that does include it, but yeah, I presume she's still running. Because I wasn't down there this season, I don't really know who was there and wasn't there after COVID. So, yeah, there's no actual bus or anything that goes there.
And final question, we now have 2 water taxis. What difference have the water taxis made to, and I'm not just talking about cruise ship time, but what difference have the water taxis made to the connectivity of Port Chalmers?
I think it's been really good because we've had a lot of people, coming, like cycling down the other side and then coming over to port on, the water taxi and stopping off sometimes at Quarantine Island and then coming across and having lunch or what have you. And I think once the shared path's open, there will be a lot more people who will want to do that loop. So it's good that we've now got more than one.
And would that be predominantly locals, or is there a fair size of visitor slice in that as well?
I think it's a real mixture. There are a lot of local people who are taking the opportunity to go to quarantine, and that's kind of increasing. So yeah, I think that's sort of going to be a real mixture, and they're going to be able to take more bikes, I think, now. So yeah, it could be. I mean, the thing is, for us, visitors aren't just going to be cyclists from out of town. They're going to be visitors from Dunedin or Oamaru or somewhere that decided to come down and cycle our cycleway. And I am told that a percentage of the ships that are due to come in next season are going to carry electric bikes. I suspect they'll charge for them, I'm not sure, but it wouldn't surprise me. Thank you.
Councillor Weatherall, final question.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ange, for representing your community. I have a question around George Street, and you're mentioning that deterring cycling possibly by putting in a park prior to just have them not bike through George Street. Do you have similar concerns around traffic and heavy traffic like the Taieri Community Board has as far as traffic flow through George Street?
Oh, we've always been concerned about that. We've now got a 40 K zone in the centre of Port. Not everybody follows it, but that's made a real difference and slowed the traffic down, which is much better. We did look for 30, but they weren't prepared to go there because of the port. So it is a problem. And it's just something people have lived with, I guess, for a very long time. They did once buy property in Mount Street and they were going to put in a bypass, but then they ended up selling the houses and, not doing it.
Right, thank you. And around the upgrade, what you're saying is that you're quite happy with the flow of traffic and the two-way traffic flow in the upgrade that is impending?
I think so, yeah. It has, I suppose, everybody would like logging ships not to be locking ships. Oh, that would be good. Logging trucks or container trucks, there to be less of and more of that stuff, especially the logs coming by rail. And it has been something we almost achieved one year until the Road Transport Forum found out and stepped in. But it's a main street. It's a bit like Palmerston, I suppose, but they've got a much wider main street than we have, and a lot of their heavy traffic goes through at night as well, which we have it through the day pretty much, say 6 days a week. It's not so much on Sunday.
Thank you very much. Again, a big thank you to you for your service and commitment to your community, service to and commitment to your community. And thank you for making the time and preparing your presentation.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. And now welcome to the table Mr. Andrew Sims, Chair of the Mosgiel Taieri Community Board. Tēnā koe and welcome. The next 15 minutes are all yours, sir.
Just Thank you, Madam Chairman, councillors, DCC staff. Thank you very much for this opportunity to address the council on behalf of the Mosgiel Taieri community. It's my intention to use my 15 minutes to really update councillors on the work that we're doing at the moment and what's concerning us the most, and less so to perhaps advocate for what we did advocate for in the annual plan. The first picture I've got up there is of the Silver Stream. The Mosgiel Taieri Community Board are highly concerned about flood protection schemes for Mosgiel, Outram and across the Taieri. Recent advocacy for 41 residents affected by the Otago Regional Council's attempt to red zone properties on the Gordon Road floodway has uncovered a willful lack of maintenance by the Regional Council towards the Silver Stream flood protection scheme. The board holds a recommending report written by staff of the ORC from 2019, which details the loss of capacity of the Silver Stream due to aggradation and bank subsidence. The report shows that during the significant flood event in 2017, 6.2 million cubics of water overtopped the Silver Stream flood bank at the Gordon Road. But the report also shows that had the Silver Stream been maintained to its original engineered capacity, just 3.4 million cubics of water would have gone over the Silver Stream flood bank. The report shows that smaller floods in May 2010, June 2015 and again in 2018 would not have occurred at all if the maintenance work had been done by the Regional Council. The report goes on to detail what needs to be done to restore the capacity of the Silver Stream, but then concludes that such work must be considered on a cost versus benefit basis. I'm just not quite sure how to get to the next slide. Sorry. Oh, there we are. Now I've lost it. That slide there shows aggradation of the Silver Stream flood channel. That's typical gravel build-up and some bank subsidence. That slide there shows a bank collapse that happened in 2018 that's never been attended to. Both of those slides are 400 metres upstream from Te Puna o Whakaaehu, the brand new swimming pool. Yes, this is an ORC matter, but the consequences and the costs of floods fall on the DCC and on the Mosgiel-Taieri community. The ORC is currently objecting to the DCC's 2GP designation of the Gordon Road floodway as Hazard 1. The ORC is trying to apply a blanket Hazard 1A across the Gordon Road floodway, which is effectively a red zone. This designation affects 41 landowners. I've spoken to many homeowners who have never been flooded in 40 years, and I've spoken to other homeowners who have had 2.5 metres of water through their houses 3 times in the last 15 years. The ORC is attempting to group all of those people in the same group and red zone the whole lot of them. The DCC is resisting, and the matter is in front of the Environment Court, costing ORC and DCC ratepayers hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees. It's now set to cost the 41 affected landowners $100,000 in legal fees to be heard in the Environment Court. Extraordinary in this action, the ORC are using their own lack of maintenance of the Silver Stream as evidence in the Environment Court as to why the affected landowners should be red zoned. So the ORC have used a model of the 2017 flood as evidence to show why those people are facing pending doom. But as we know from the ORC's own report, the 2017 flood was twice as bad as it needed to be if they did the maintenance. The board's gone to some lengths to ensure that the elected members of the ORC know what's going on. It's important to the board that everybody in this room knows what's going on as well. Come back to that. Cycle trails. The Mosgiel-Taieri Community Board is advocating for the Taieri to become a hub of connected cycle and walking trails connecting Dunedin with Mosgiel and Outram and then on to central Otago. These trails will provide a low-cost, low-carbon, all-ages recreational asset for our communities, a genuine commuting option, and bring high-value cycle tourists into Dunedin from central Otago. 85,000 cyclists use the Central Otago Rail Trail every year. Most of them catch the shuttle back from Middlemarch to Clyde and then fly out of Queenstown. Imagine if even half of those people came through to the Taieri and then on to Dunedin. Imagine what that would mean for Dunedin. The board is working with the Tunnels Trail Trust and the Taieri Trails Group to try and make this happen. The priorities for us are the Dunedin to Mosgiel Tunnel Trail, and that photograph that you see there is from the open day on Sunday, where just under 2,000 people walked through the Chain Hills Tunnel from Wingatui through to Abbotsford. That was a fantastic turnout for Mother's Day. You had to walk through the mud, but it showed a lot of people within the community what a brilliant cycle trail this is going to be. The board will continue to work to produce an economic justification for the Taieri Gorge Rail Corridor to be transformed into a world-class cycle and walking trail as the best use for this asset. We very much appreciate the attention that the council gave to our advocacy to try and have the heavy transport rerouted away from Gordon Road. The Mosgiel-Taieri Community Board's heavily involved in that. The board's proposing to hold a public meeting to get the community behind this and to enable the board to communicate to the DCC exactly what the majority of the community want. The board will then look to the DCC to include funding in the long-term plan for a feasibility study into the proposed bypass. The separation of heavy transport from the citizens of Mosgiel, many of whom are vulnerable people, the old and the young, was a top priority in 2013 in the 2013 DCC Integrated Transport Plan. It's the intention of the community board to make sure that everybody who will benefit from a heavy transport bypass has a say and is heard, rather than a smaller number of people who have a conflict of interest, who seem to be able to make the most amount of noise on these issues. The board is looking forward this year to the opening of Te Puna o Whakaehu on June the 19th. There's great excitement in the community, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the DCC providing this wonderful community facility for our families and our community. I've got 3 small children, and the gratitude that I hold towards the trust and the DCC that have made this happen is immeasurable. It's a wonderful, all ages, low cost recreational facility, which is really, really important to our community, so thank you very much. The board's looking forward to consultation on the final design and inclusions for the upgrade of Outram Glen, and similarly on the final design and inclusions for the Memorial Park upgrade. Just the last thing that I'd like to talk about is community board funding. It's my view and my very limited experience that a well-functioning and effective and empowered community board represents exceptional value for the community and for the council. The community boards can deal with small local issues swiftly and often avoiding or minimising DCC staff input. And I had an example of that myself in the last couple of weeks when an illegal sawmill was established on the Taieri. Some very concerned residents got a hold of me. I took some photographs, did some homework, found out who the operator was, spoke to the landowner who told me to go away, put that matter through to the DCC, and within 3 days they'd acted upon it, made a couple of phone calls and closed it down. So that was a fantastic result between the community board and the DCC and the community. DCC staff can refer questions to the community board for input or investigation. The community board discretionary fund can be used to seed community projects which yield results for the DCC and the community far in excess of the value put in by the board. And I think most community boards have plenty of examples of that. The discretionary fund is also the only source of funding for community engagement that the board has. Participation in events such as the AMP show, community galas, requires a professional and effective presence from the community board, but they're an invaluable tool to gather feedback from the community. The fund was set at $10,000 in 1990. It hasn't been reviewed since. CPI adjusted just under $22,000 to do the same work that $10,000 would do in 1990. Place-based groups such as the Taieri Network do an excellent job with their resource. The board, the Mosgiel-Taieri Community Board, has a strong cooperative relationship with the Taieri Network. The network receives $65,000 per annum from the DCC, which certainly allows them to look more professional and do more in the community than the board can. The roles are different. There is crossover, and we fully support the work of the Taieri Network. Once again, I think the council is getting exceptional value for its money from that organisation. But I think the funding model between the DCC, the boards, and the place-based groups is probably due for a review. Thank you. Happy for questions.
Thank you. That was under time, so awesome. Deputy Mayor Barker.
Thank you, Chair. I have one question that I think you would have heard me ask just before about the consultation with the Strategic Walking and Cycling Network that we just heard this morning that it had just been out, and I just wondered if you had the chance to engage with that.
no, I haven't seen that yet.
I'll follow it up.
Councillor Lucas.
Thank you. You talked about presenting to the ORC about the issue with the silver stream. So have there been any responses yet about what they might intend to do?
I got 5 minutes in front of the ORC last week. They sat there completely po-faced and didn't ask a single question. So I think they probably had advice about that, but before I even got home, I had an email from the chairman asking me to come to a meeting next month to discuss that and other issues. So hopefully that meeting will be a little bit more constructive, notwithstanding that we're constrained by the fact that the matter's in front of the Environment Court at the moment. That seems to be constraining them more than it's constraining me. But there's two parts to it. One is the advocacy for the affected landowners. And look, I think I look at that and think there's actually a mediated outcome possible here. There are the landowners who have been flooded 3 times in 15 years absolutely understand that they're in a different boat to the people that have never been flooded. And I think a much more intelligent application of the hazard mapping would probably resolve that matter. But the secondary issue to me, and the thing that's causing me the greatest concern at the moment, is the lack of maintenance of the floodways. Where I am, I pay a targeted rate. You will too, Councillor Lucas, pay a targeted rate for flood protection. I think we've got an entitlement to go to bed at night and assume that that flood protection work's being done and the maintenance is being done. And I'm quite astounded by the recommending report that we've got a hold of that indicates that the maintenance is not being done and that the ORC are fully aware of the consequences of not doing that maintenance. So that's the second part to it, and that's where, I don't think we're constrained by anything in terms of having that argument with them. So I guess probably my intention of bringing to the attention of everybody in here is to say this is something that we probably as a community need to all get behind, because it will be affecting others as well. It won't just be the Taieri.
Thank you. And there's nothing specific in the ORC's annual plan for 23-24 that actually specifies silver stream maintenance, from what I understand.
Not at this point, no.
Any other questions? Councillor Houlihan.
Yeah, I agree with you with the discretionary fund, because I felt there was not a lot you can do with it, and I'd actually raised it last term saying I think it would make sense for the boards to have
Is
a
there
bit
a
more of
question?
yes, good point. Do you think you've got the support of the board now is the board unanimous in its support for that? Because I know at the time there wasn't a lot of support to increase it, certainly from a few anyway.
It has been discussed, and I think there is support now. I think the board understand that we could do a lot more work and we could take on probably more worthwhile projects if the fund was, even if it was just inflation adjusted, then we could do that. Thank you.
Are there any more questions? Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I'm just concerned about the silver stream situation, and it looks like it needs cleaned out, really, the slips and so forth, the constrictions on that stream. Has there been any discussion about why action in that is inhibited? Are there other factors, external factors, holding them back from doing that?
Cost. Yep. The recommending report details what needs to be done, and that is that the channel needs to be restored to its engineered capacity as it was built in 1974 by the Catchment Board, and there are some low areas of the Gordon Road flood bank that need to be brought back to height. But the only consideration in the recommending report is cost.
Okay, so 3 questions. Firstly, how has the Gordon Road area dropped? The flood bank dropped. How has that come about? And what is the cost? Is there a figure on the report for the overall cost estimate?
No, there's not. It just suggests that the required restoration would need to be considered on a cost versus benefit basis. There's no costing for doing the work. I would assume it would be expensive, but they've got access, and any floodway such as this, you would assume, required maintenance.
And the flood bank at Gordon Road, that's dropped, did you say, lowered? So what has caused that?
Sorry, I think that's just subsidence. So the bank has just over time. Those flood banks were built in 1974, and I think it's just gravity that's created that. So they're fully aware of where those areas are and what needs to be done to bring them back up to the original height.
See, that's not likely to be a result of people walking on top of it or using the top of those flood banks for transit, because I know that the regional council is not enthusiastic about using flood banks further south of there for cycleways.
The engineered lower flood bank is on the true right of the Silver Stream, which is not the one that's used by the public to walk up and down or for the proposed cycle trail. No, I think it's just simply gravity that over time it's subsided.
And is this report public property? Where can it be found?
It was provided to members of the Gordon Road Spillway group some time ago by the ORC, but it's a draft recommending report. Nobody's denying the content of it.
Councillor Houlihan.
This may not be something you can answer, but I'm wondering if this could be considered. There's a fund, I believe, that the government's got, for climate change mitigation. I wondered if that would sit in that for funding, because it's erosion from, ongoing, obviously, heavy rain and all the rest of it, that it might sit under that. That's just a suggestion, but I'm just wondering if that has been considered.
That would be for the regional council to apply for that, but I saw with interest this morning several communities putting their hands up for that, and thought that I think it's $1 billion. I think that the government are committing for that. Look, it has to be beyond my pay grade in respect to whether they would comply from that. But I think the concern for me is that the council have been collecting enormous amounts of targeted flood protection rate money from the Taieri. Some farmers pay $75,000 a year for flood protection on the Taieri. There's a suspicion that money's possibly not being used to do what it should be being used to do, and that's a great concern.
Thank you. There being no other questions, I just extend all our collective thanks to you, Mr. Sims, for your leadership and your preparation and your efficient delivery, and your care and service to your community. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And now welcome to the table Mr. Alasdair Morrison, Chair of the West Harbour Community Board.
Like a Waiheke Coast Community Board.
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry, yeah. It's a type. Sorry, I was just misreading and not concentrating. Aroha mai. Waiheke Coast Board.
Good afternoon. Nice to see you all again. I'm just going to set the stopwatch. One of the functions of a community board is to respond to the concerns of our communities. And the Waikouiti Coast Community Board represents a number of communities. From the top, we've got Waikouiti, Karatani, Seacliff, Warrington, Evansdale, Waitati, Doctors Point, Orokonui, and all the surrounding areas. Yesterday, you got to meet our Deputy Chair, Dr. Andy Barrett. Andy lives just south of Karatani, and it is Karatani we want to speak to you about this afternoon. For the next 12 and a half minutes, everything I talk about will be on your screens up there, so you won't have to look at our smiling faces until question time. The area we're looking at is where the Waikouiti River exits and comes out to sea, and down at the bottom is what we call the Karatani Harbour. And Andy and I have taken on a project to look at all aspects of what's happening in that particular area. And the different parts of this include the Karatani Wharf, the spit, the harbour entrance, the seawall, sewerage infrastructure, and flooding issues. We've spoken to a number of people about this already and shown this presentation to people. We would have been with you a number of weeks ago, but your meeting was cancelled. The list of people up there is not in any order of priority. It was just who happened to be available and when. So we spoke and showed this presentation to your fairly new council coastal specialist, Raphael Mariani. We've shown it to our community board, to some representatives of the City Council Transportation Department, to the Karatani Fishermen's Association, to the Eastern Boating and Fishing Club, to the Regional Council Harbour Master, to Katihui Raparunaka Kipukitaraki, to some members of the City Council Executive Leadership Team, and we will be speaking to the ORC, ALT, and here we are today speaking to your good selves. A quick look at flooding to begin with. Many of you are aware that between the Karatani turn off to the State Highway and the Waikouiti River Bridge, that road floods from time to time as the river comes up and overtops the road. This is looking from the railway line. As you leave Karatani heading north, you head towards the State Highway, and this is what it looked like on the 27th of July last year, where the road was completely flooded and closed. And in the distance there, if I can get this little thing to waggle for me, there we are. Up in the distance, you can just make out trucks that are stuck on the highway. The flood was quite large, and quite unusually, the flood also attacked the south end of the highway between Hawkesbury and the Kilmog, and so the road was cut off down there to north and south of Hawkesbury, which is quite unusual. We were putting some thought as to what we might have to do if this flood lasted overnight or even longer. Fortunately, the tide went out and it disappeared, and people were able to get on their way. This was the same day. If I can get this wee thing to go properly here, and I might have to get our helper to come along and get this. This was the river exiting. This is down by the Fisherman's Wharf. And you can see there's a fair amount of water going out. You can see a little bit of the spit got chopped off there as well. And this was on a day when there was a 1.8 metre tide. Oh. What have you done? It was going fine. Yusuf, what have you done? There we are. Now what's happened? There we are. Now, you may recall that at that particular time there were a couple of commercial boats in the harbour, got carried out on that great big wash of river. Their moorings got, we think, destroyed by some debris floating there. The boats got carried out to sea and then turned around again and got washed up onto Waikouiti Beach, where they were essentially munted. The yellow boat you see there, a commercial fishing boat, that was opened up like a boiled egg, and that was written off. The catamaran may or may not end up being repaired. This is the Karitani Bowling Club. This was the day of the flood, and like many other properties around there, it was just totally flooded and unusable. One of the expensive parts of a flood like this is the damage to the highways, to the road. This is Coast Road between the railway line and the highway, and this was the day after the flood. And what the flood's doing is effectively lifting the tar seal and moving it off to the side. And that yellow line was originally in the middle of the road. And this is not an uncommon thing that happens when we get floods in that area. Sewerage infrastructure. We're just going to have a brief look at this. This is an aerial view looking down on top of the peninsula, and the sewerage from the dwellings up there goes through a pipe underneath the seawall there off to the collecting point near the public toilets. And it goes underneath what was a very popular walking way all along there. But it's not so much now. Andy noticed this a couple of years ago, that the sewage pipe itself was uncovered by the action of the sea. And by the time council came along to attend to it, it was basically hanging in the breeze. So they put some boxing in, poured concrete, and that section of pipe is now encased in its concrete coffin. And that's okay for now, but that whole area is subject to erosion, and it is something that we really need to keep an eye on. Main thing we're looking at this afternoon is the harbour entrance down there. This photograph, the aerial photographs from Google Maps from 2016, and you can see that the channel alongside the peninsula is fairly clear, so that boats could get in and out. And this one is from 2018 on the council's website. And again, the channel's relatively clear. But 3 months ago, on the 19th of February, this is what it looked like, where sand had built up to the point where we have a sandbar at the entrance to the harbour. This photograph's taken at low tide, and we're very fortunate to have a gentleman by the name of Shane Flavel, who lives in Karitani, who has very, very high quality drone and photography abilities. This photograph was at high tide, and you can just make out the sandbar under the water there. And for people who know what they're doing, they could take their boats out around the spit, out to here, hang a left, and then a right, and safely get out to sea. For people who don't know quite so much, if they tried to go straight on and get stuck on the bar at high tide, or on an incoming tide, it wouldn't be so much of a problem, but if that was on an outgoing tide and the sea was coming at them, that would be a real problem. To the right-hand side of the fisherman's wharf there, the old rock wall has deteriorated quite badly and it is ineffective. Likewise, the channel rock wall, that has deteriorated, and that's pretty much ineffective. And this video you're going to see just now shows just what can happen. And I'm not quite sure what my wee friend is going to make me do there. There we go. So we've looked at the river going out at the moment. Here we are looking at the sea coming in. This was on a high tide on the 15th of June last year. And so remember, there's a sewerage pipeline under that walkway on the right-hand side, and the sea comes in there on a high tide and tends to scour out everything underneath the rocks there. I think that was me going, as we do. Now what's happened? Yusuf, what have you done? You've lost my left-hand thing. There we go. So we've got two main issues here. One is the lack of safe navigation in and out of the harbour, and the other one is that the river flow to the ocean is reduced by the build-up out there. We had a similar thing in Waitati in 2006 when we had quite a nasty flood in Waitati, and that was exacerbated by a build-up of gravel where the Waitati River flows out towards Blueskin Bay. We got all that gravel removed in the space of the next year, and from there on in we haven't had a problem. So this is a bit of an issue, and as part of everything that we're looking at, flooding is part of what Andy and I are investigating. There are more than 40 recreational vessels use the harbour from time to time. They come up from Dunedin, down from Oamaru, from Palmerston, various places. There's pretty good parking there and good launching facilities. If a boat happened to get stuck on that sandbar, it would take about an hour and a half for a boat to come and offer assistance from Port Chalmers. Commercial vessels have been unable to use the channel for some time, and you saw earlier 2 of them got fairly munted on Waikibiri Beach. To fix it, good water flow in this direction is required to rectify the problem. What we need to be able to do is to rebuild the inner rock wall, a rather good photograph from Shane there. And what that will then do is encourage positive water flow around past the wharf, and it will protect the shoreline. Because at this stage the river can more or less go straight on to the shoreline, and we're starting to get some issues there. We need to rebuild the channel rock wall, and we need to modify this rock wall, which was a repair carried out 2 years ago. Prior to 2021, there was a reasonably straight line flow for the river going out. Now, you don't have to read this right now, but this is a report from an emergency works that was done in 2021 when part of the concrete seawall collapsed, and some of it fell in, some of it fell out, and the sea started attacking the land. So the council got hold of the consultants, they had a look at it all and recommended a rock wall be built. It wasn't a case of just chucking rocks into the sea, it was a properly engineered rock wall. And that's what we've ended up with there, and that protects the land in from that rock wall. But slight problem there is that the rocks actually stick out past the line of the concrete wall. And what that effectively does, it causes the water flow to actually be diverted into the stream, and that can set up eddy currents and cause the sand to do funny things. This is a still shot from that video you saw earlier on, and you can see that the water has come along, it's hit the rock wall and it turned left, and so rather odd things are happening there. That was a picture of the spit getting slightly chopped off on that particular day. It's largely remediated now, actually. The spit itself is very, very important. It protects the coast, it protects the coast road, and the whole of the shoreline. And in 2000, after a southeasterly storm, it disappeared. It got totally wiped out. The waves were coming in and coming over Coast Road, and a lot of damage was done, and the cost to put a new rock wall in there was substantial. It was remediated by putting, it was remediated by putting sand fences in this line here, just out from the green part there. And they largely worked, and the spit largely remediated itself. Then in 2015, there was damage to it again, and it got fairly well wiped out. And you may recall that that was remediated with driftwood and slash from nearby. And you may recall the previous coastal specialist, Tom Simon Smith, actually got an award for what he did there. For us, the priority order of things is as follows. We want to see that part of that new rock wall move back a bit. It's not a big job. It's a case of digging a hole behind it, unpicking what has been put there, and then putting it back again further back. That will then allow a smoother flow along the rock wall under the wharf. We would like to see a repair to the rock wall to the right of the wharf there. This is what used to be there. This is a photograph from the Fishermen's Club there. And so the rock wall that used to exist there came all the way around and did a bit of a hook around there. And the descriptions we've had from the fishermen who have been there for the last 40, 50 years are telling us that it worked extremely well. And again, just showing you what we showed you before, repairing that rock wall will make a big difference to the way in which the river can flow. There has been some recent scouring out happening there, which is a bit unusual, and we would like to get on top of this as soon as possible. What we would also like to see is continual aerial monitoring, and our friend in Karitani is able to do that, and we are working towards making him a proper council contractor. And if we can do aerial monitoring and comparing like for like with the same tide times and rainfall events and all the rest of it, we'll get a really good picture of what's happening here. And then the other thing is to repair the channel rock wall. And apart from guiding the flow of the river, it will also protect the bottom of the peninsula where there is a fair bit of infrastructure there, some of it quite valuable. So we need the rock wall to come back to where it used to be. There's the channel marker that we saw in that previous video. They're still there. They've got solar powered lights on top of them. They are actually railway irons. They're rusting a little bit, but they're not going to fall over anytime soon. But they will need attention in the fullness of time. And then, if all this is done, we will once again have a safe and clear channel once again. And so there you are, about 2 seconds past 15 minutes. It's not bad. So that's the end, or shall we say it's perhaps the beginning, if we can get some of this work done. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
In the 2022 flood, did the channel open up again straight? Did it open out straight to sea?
Sorry, on which flood?
2022. You showed us where the water was flooding across the road.
Right. No, that sandbar has been there now for over a year, and it's been of some real concern. And this is where we got involved when Andy was getting lots of calls from the local people. The fishermen we are speaking to have lived there for 40, 50 years and fished, and they've seen it in all its splendid glory of different tidal conditions and whatnot. So they're the ones that are bringing this to our attention, as they did in 2015 when it collapsed as well. So it's not actually here today, gone tomorrow. And what we do really want to get on top of is getting these aerial views of it and looking at exactly what's happening, be it on a weekly, monthly basis or whatever, but looking at like for like, state of the tide, state of the river, height of the tide, etc. So we're comparing apples with apples.
I mean, you showed us that the flood happening and the great volume of water going past the wharf. And you heard the video from the wharf, and it looked like it was going straight out. I was just wondering if that flood cleared the channel, because that was only a year or so ago.
No, it didn't. That's the problem, because we've got this funny diversion as well of the water hitting the thing.
Kia ora. Councillor Gary, followed by Councillor Benson Pope.
Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Morrison. Can you just tell me, you mentioned 2 tide heights, 1.8 I think, and one was 2.2. Was the 2.2 a king tide?
Yes, a 2.2 is getting up around the king tide. Around this area, your tides usually go between 1.7 and 2.2. 2.2s maybe every couple of months or so. 2s and 2.1s are not unusual.
Have you presented this to, you have presented this to ORC, I'm assuming?
We showed this to the Otago Regional Council Harbour Master. We are arranging to show this to the ORC as well. Councillor Noon, who used to be our chap here, he's seen some of the pictures of this, but not the whole video yet. So our plan is, after this, to show this to the Regional Council, and we've spoken to Simon Drew and the likes. They know we're going to do that, and then we would look to speak to the Regional Councillors as well. And our aim is to just let people know what's happening, because we accept that most of your efforts have been around St Clair and St Kilda, and we fully understand all of that. So what we decided to do was to take this whole area on as a project, Andy and myself, so that we could do a lot of the spade work, find out what's going on, put the thing together as a package, and then give it to staff and say, here you are, this is the problem, this is the likely remediation, here are some costs to do with it, and then get on with it. And then we want to have a look at the other aspects of this, which is to do with the flooding and flood remediation. So it's quite a big job.
So thank you for all of that. You'll appreciate that the knowledge of the science in terms of coastal geomorphology is increasing all the time, and we've got climate change layer as well. But it's helpful to have all that local knowledge. What response did you get from the Harbour Master around the safe navigation issues?
The Harbour Master's first thing was, you must make sure that you show this to the ELT at ORC, and he's concerned about that channel is not safe for navigation. That was his main thing.
Will he do advocacy as the Harbour Master? Will he do some advocacy as the Harbour Master around his responsibilities for safe navigation?
Yes. We want to talk to the Regional Council, because they've got the responsibility for all of this, as to exactly how he goes about that. We don't want to tell the Harbour Master how he should be doing his job. He was the one that pointed out it would take a boat an hour and a half to get up from Port Chalmers to help, for instance. So we're just walking down that road with the Harbour Master, not in spite of him, not against him. He's a really good guy. and we get on very well.
Thank you.
Councillor Benson-Pope.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You've both, Councillor Geary and you, have just touched on the issue, but every slide you showed us made me think coastal marine area. Ultimately, consent issues around any work, and the responsibility, I would have thought, as you just said, for a lot of this remedial work lies clearly with the ORC, does it not?
Yeah, an interesting point. Regarding consent, in my humble opinion, what we're talking about here is repairing existing structures, and I love the way you're giggling there. The smaller one that was done 2 years ago, that's a repair to a repair, and pretty sure that doesn't need a resource consent. In my humble opinion, and I have lots of humble opinions, I don't think the other two should need resource consent, because all we are doing is putting some rocks back where rocks used to be to achieve what used to be achieved. Because there's proof from all the anecdotal stuff we've had from the last 40 to 50 years, we know that what was there functioned well. Due to neglect, really, and out of sight, out of mind, things fall into bits. So all I would like to see is the rocks put back.
Well, I know the city has been involved with some rock wall work out there in recent times that I recall clearly, because of erosion round by that park, by the toilets and so on. But I'm looking forward to you keeping us posted about this, as I'm sure you will.
We had some discussions with a senior staff member who talked about the ownership of these rock walls. Who actually owns them? Is it the city council? Is it the regional council? Or is it nobody? Or is it the government? The wharf itself is owned by the city council. That came across at the time of amalgamation. It was finally commissioned in 1971, and so the wharf is a city council asset. The buildings on top are privately owned, and that's a separate issue that Andy and I are looking at as well. It would seem logical that since the wharf was put in there, and it's a council thing, the rock walls put on either side of it would also be a city council asset. Again, in my humble opinion. Good try, huh?
Any more questions? Councillor O'Malley.
Thanks, Alice. I'm going back to the start of your presentation when you showed Coast Road and State Highway 1. Would it come as a surprise to you that I raised at the Regional Transport Committee flooding resilience on State Highway 1 and the section south of Waikawaiti is not on their flood resilience plan?
Well, we'll have to do something about that. One thing we want to have a good look at with this flooding in the whole Waikawaiti area, the Waikawaiti estuary area, clearing that channel helps a little bit, but there's other aspects around the whole of the area, because when you've had a heavy rain event, if you go just north of Hawkesbury, you'll see inland huge swathes of lakes of water and all the rest of it. There are a number of floodgates around the area, and our next wee job, once we've passed this one on to get it done, we've got the wharf to look at, and we've got this whole flooding issue to look at, and very much it's going to be a case of making sure that Waka Kotahi and every man and his dog are well informed about the whole thing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Is it your opinion that if the channel was, rock walls were built up and the channel became straight and clear, that would clear water from the river more quickly, thus reducing flooding on State Highway 1?
Yes, it is, but quite the extent of that effect we don't know yet. We are talking with your coastal specialist about that, and there's more discussions to be had as to exactly what it would be. The thing that you need for something like this is good evidence. And so with our new friend in Karitani and his aerial photography and that's where we can start really putting good evidence together, because we think we know what the best way is to do this, and we know what it would cost to actually put the new rocks back. We don't know what council might want to spend on consultants to agree with us, but there is more to be done, and certainly it's a big picture, this whole thing. Evidence is going to be the key.
Thank you. I think there being no other questions, I'd just like to express our gratitude to you, Mr. Morrison, for all your decades of service and leadership, and also thank you to Dr. Barrett for your time and your tautoko of Mr. Morrison. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
And after Mr. Ware speaks, I propose to take a break, so that please do stay so we can have some afternoon tea together. Thank you. Right, I'd like to welcome to the table Mr. Ware, Chair of the Saddle Hill Community Board, and Mr. McFadgen. Mr. Keith McFadgen's here in support. Kia ora.
Kia ora everyone. I'll just reintroduce myself, Paul Ware, Chairman Saddle Hill Community Board, and by my side here we have Keith McFadden, who brings a lot of experience and knowledge on the Saddle Hill Board area, and I'd like to thank you for having us once again. Sorry, I'll just pour myself a cup of water. So, about a week or two ago, we were here presenting on an annual plan. Today, we might be repeating some of that, especially around what the people are after: a shared pathway. So, bikes, joggers, mums, dads with babies, pets. There's been quite a lot of data that's come back to us from people who live in the area, use the one from Waterville to Green Island on a good day. A lot of cycling, a lot of people walking in, sort of exercising, getting the pets out and things. So we'd like to see that continued on from Waterville to Ocean View. And after the press release from last time, we had quite a lot of good support feedback, especially from biking clubs who fully endorse it, especially one club that comes out from Blackhead and uses the new road that's been put in there and comes down and around and hooks up in Waterville there. They are really supportive of it, but mainly from a safety point of view with traffic, logging trucks. They like to see that extended, and we would love to work with the council on that and get that put in. That'd be awesome. We'll also, especially the youth of Waterville, are really looking forward to the new basketball courts that are meant to be coming along, and that is, when I'm working on the crossing the roads at Fairfield School, that is one thing that comes up again and again. People like, thank you, this is what we've been looking for. Our kids aren't 3 years old anymore, they're going on 12, 13, and just to get something there is brilliant, and so I say thank you for that. While we're in the Waterville area again, a bit of a concern that has also been raised is the roading, resealing jobs, the patch seal jobs that seem to be just repatch. Problem will come up again, same place, same time, and it's like, haven't we been here before? Trying to fix things. So we'd really love to work with council and get those areas sorted out. Sort of do it once, do it right. Sort of job, be great. And from feedback from one of our last meetings, we hear that there'll be new data collected sometime on the coastline, Saddle Hill coastline, looking at erosion, so we can get a better picture of where exactly it is and what needs to be done and what we can do. And yeah, I know a lot of locals down there are really looking forward to seeing that in action and to put together with their own knowledge of the area, which would be great. Also, another thing that's come up is ocean view drainage. Now, this is a thing year in, year out. Heavy rain events. I know a few of you councillors and mayor have been experienced this, sandbagging, draining drains where we can, and wading through water. So it's sort of something we get to look forward to every year. Not that we want to look forward to it, but it keeps us busy, and we're sort of wanting to know what can we do here. I think it's an area that really needs to be looked at hard. It's like is it drainage that needs improved? Is it pumps that need to be put in? How can we fix this area, especially for the locals that live there? And I'd like to pass over to Keith now with his words of wisdom. And thank you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, like Paul said, I think we've had a tradition of coming along and wanting to work alongside council rather than against them. So it's just one of those things. We're constantly looking for improvements in the facilities that we do have, and like the footpaths. I mean, for a lot of people in Brighton, they still don't have footpaths on either side of the road, which is kind of not something that we want to see. But we know that we've had some roads actually get one side with a footpath, which is is halfway there. So that's cool. And especially we've got young families out there now with strollers and all sorts of things. And also I think we need to be providing for the disabled in terms of their access around their own community. So getting a footpath on one side of the road would be really good. So you'll see all that stuff in our plan, and we have tried to prioritise some of the things that we think need to be done kind of now. It took us quite a long time, I think 10-15 years to get the toilet at Ocean View, and that was probably on the back of Freedom Camping, and the one in Fairfield took a wee bit longer, but I think on the back of the upgrade to the playground was a catalyst to getting that done as well. But in the Freedom Camping season, for example, council have been really good and got us some more extra portaloos to put in at that site, because that's how busy it gets. And obviously the Gala Day is a huge success for the city, not just for the city but for our area as well. But yeah, we're trying to prioritise. There's other things that we pie in the sky stuff that we would like to see. Well, not necessarily pie in the sky, but obviously we've got one of the best beaches in Dunedin with Brighton Beach, and we're looking at different ways of how we can help people with disabilities access the beach by putting in some kind of matting process or other bits and pieces. But that's stuff that the board can just continue to work on and look for some partnerships within the community to be able to do that. In terms of the drainage at the Domain, for example, we've had heaps of community with diggers and all sorts of things that have been able to help out as time's gone by in terms of mitigating the water that built up there. But like I said, we've got a really good relationship with council, especially. Can't speak highly enough of the staff that we've been working with in terms of helping us address all those issues. And I'm sure you've heard it from a number of boards, but we've got some priorities there as well that we'd like to work on. Cheers.
Thank you. That's another efficient under time presentation. Thank you very much. Are there any questions, Councillor Walker?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Paul and Keith. Just today, and I guess the annual plan, there's been a general communication from them for a desire to see an uplift in the discretionary fund. I'm just wondering, Keith, particularly some of the things you listed there, if that happened, would that enable the board to initiate some community projects themselves?
Yes, it would, and some of those, like I said, and I think Alistair pointed out as well, where we can actually provide some assistance around, getting all that work done, so that council don't necessarily have to spend a lot of time and effort on some of those things, where we can get those private partnerships in terms of some of the things we can get done. If we had some allocation, a bit more allocation in regards to that. But however, I will just you're right, but I just want to say in terms of our discretionary fund this year that we had a ambassadors award. Normally it's $1,000 and we give it away. Well, we open up for submission in terms of young people under 25 who are excelling in different bits and pieces, and we've been getting incredible submissions from some really amazing people in our area. And this year we extended it out a little bit to give a contribution to all the submissions that we got, and the person that actually won it was going to a scout jamboree. So that in itself, while it doesn't sound for some people really cool, it was, this young boy was amazing. So we got some really good things. So that discretionary fund was really useful and helpful for us to be able to promote that. And also they got the chance to come along into a council sort of arrangement and they'd be able to present and get all that experience around what local government's all about. So that was cool.
Thank you. Councillor O'Malley, followed by Councillor Gilbert.
Yes, Madam Chair. Thanks for your presentation. It's about the shared path you're asking about. There's an activity starting in the Regional Transport Committee to map all existing and future cycleways and get the integrated network sorted out. I assume then you'd be quite keen for this to be put on that list as an on the map, so that it can be seen as a pathway that the community is asking for to be looked at funding in the future.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, would love that. Yeah, the more support we get for it, the better. And yeah, if we get OIC on board with it as well, that'd be great. Just touching back, one of the things on Brighton Gala Day, that's also one of the main points that came across in our tent that we have set up there, so we can, talk to people and things like that, was the shared pathway and their support as well. So in response to your question, yes, we'd love to.
And then what about the other end? When you're coming into Green Island and then the connection to what will be coming out of Chain Hills Tunnel and then eventually making its way into town, I assume you'll be wanting that end connected up at some point as well?
Yes, that'd be great. It's sort of outside our area, but yeah, it would link in, and that's, I guess, the things you're sort of looking for is like smooth flow linking and communities who support that, even though it's not in our area. But I think everyone would be in favour of that. That'd be brilliant.
Thank you, gentlemen. There have been some themes that have come through on the presentations that we've received from the community board so far: flooding and roading. So particularly if we reference today, we've had mention of Silver Stream and it sort of blocking up and the water flow not being as fast. We've just heard from Alistair and about the Wakawiti Harbour, as they refer to it, kind of getting clogged up. Are there any areas along that Brighton stretch that could do with the same sort of treatment of clearing out to speed things up, or is it just going to not have an effect?
Yeah, probably things getting cleaned out more frequently might be would be very helpful. There's one thing we do push for, and it happens, but maybe not frequently enough. And I think, especially on the Ocean View drainage bit across from the Freedom Camping site is where the main problem tends to lie. That sort of, we can sort of control the others with sandbagging to a point, but that one just, year after year just pops its head up and problems there. But.
Okay, and the other one is on roading. Are there any areas of roading? Obviously, we heard about areas that are starting to get a bit closer. But are there any other areas of roading concern, whether it's visibility or whatever it may be in your area?
Yes, there is one. Oh, there's quite a few. We'd like to see maintenance kept up and hedge foliage trimming stuff kept back. But two concerns. One that's been raised is crossing the road behind the Brighton Surf Club. If they'd like to see the road crossing or something that improves the safety around there, that would be brilliant. And McMaster Road goes up Saddle Hill. That's I drove up that the other day, and it's a lot of potholes and things. But I suspect they've been trialling out the new dust suppression on that road. Am I correct? And that seems it works great, but now everything's hard, and then you got big, massive potholes with. That seems to be causing a bit of a problem, but yeah.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was really interested to hear you talk about the ambassador program. And if I cast my mind back, it was a passion of mine to initiate that scheme on a small scale with seed funding. And I just wanted to say how absolutely delighted I am, and I knew that it had been uplifted and taken to another level, that you're supporting your young people in that way. I'd love to know, I don't know if you'd have this at your fingertips, but perhaps you can get back to me later. How many young people have you supported through your ambassador program?
Quite a few over the years. Like this last time round, I think it was, am I right in saying it was 6? No, it was 8. Oh, sorry, 8. And so, and they range from representing New Zealand at Touch World Championships in Australia, from someone who found their passion in agriculture and farming and had left school and was looking for more support to help fund her studies.
And I was really interested in what you said, I just want to explore this a bit more, about the experience of actually presenting to the board. What we used to do was they'd present afterwards, and the application was in paper, but I'm really interested to know, how do you see those young people grow through that process of applying and presenting to the board and so forth?
We kind of set the requirement that they come and present to the board, and then they report back. But there's also support there for going into the school, or going into the community and talking about their experience. So we're using that. You're trying to utilise that experience they've had, not only coming to the board to get funding, but also to report back and then see how we can utilise those skills. For some of them, like coming, and presenting is, it's a big deal. But we've really found afterwards that they actually felt quite empowered by it. So, we just keep encouraging that. The problem it's been quite successful, and that's why we've upped the funding associated with it, because we're getting more and more submissions. As opposed to when we first started, we might have been getting 1 or 2. Now we're getting, 10. So.
That's fantastic, and no doubt you'll find that there's other young people inspired by hearing those presentations, which is great. Thank you for that work. It is delightful to see.
Are there any more questions? All right, there being no other questions, I'd just like to offer our collective thanks to you, Mr. Ware. You haven't been a chair for very long, so I appreciate the steep learning curve and knowing that the buck stops with you, so kia ora and kia kaha. And thank you, Mr. McFadgen, for all the mahi too and your support today. I would like to move that we adjourn the meeting so that we can have afternoon tea with our leaders, community board leaders. Seconded Councillor Walker. I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Come back at 5 past or 3? 5 past. 5 past 3. Thank you. That is the motion carried. Thank you. Welcome back. We're on item 7, Civic Affairs Committee Forward Work Programme. I think that starts on page 20 of our order papers. And Madam CEO will speak to the report if required. It's happy to answer questions. Are there any questions? Councillor Gary.
I think there's a blind spot on this side of the room, I've decided. Not targeted at you. I didn't hear that, Chief. On the review of standing orders and the review of code of conduct, I have a level of frustration at the continual delay, because this has been postponed a lot, and I'm sure there's a very good reason for that. Can we be confident that this will happen in June?
No, we can't through the chair, because in reviewing the workload of the governance team and various other priorities for council, we've just been building the broad workshop schedule to do the 10-year plan. And so trying to fit in all of the stuff that has to be done that has a deadline, that is for the 10-year plan, means that this work is likely to be delayed again to fit in the vision work, the strategic refresh work, the all of the other work, noting that many councillors have other commitments at the same time, and as do staff. So my sense, I think I have already delayed it in the workshop schedule, which is about to come to you in the next week or two.
Understand, and 10 committees probably don't help that either. But moving right along, and the recognition of former mayors, again, the same reason for the delay, I'm expecting you to say.
No, there's a slightly different reason for this delay. I think, well, maybe similar but different. Ms Sullivan had reached out around the Motu to all of their councils and got a very light response, and so now is contacting the major metropolitan councils and various of them directly, but that's far more time consuming and labour intensive, because the responses we'd had from the fine folk in some of the more regional district councils don't necessarily translate to how you would want to acknowledge the service of mayors at a large metropolitan council. So we're just making sure that we bring back appropriate information.
So progress. Thank you very much.
Deputy Mayor Barker.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to ask a question about the external organisations doing the stock take of the deeds and the trust documents, and I've been trying to give them as needed. Just said staff will complete the stock take and review the policy statement, and I'm curious what the policy statement is.
So, as part of this process, again, Ms Sullivan's been doing fine work in the background and has nearly completed the stock take of the base documents for each of the, I think, 43 organisations. But in doing that, we found a policy statement on the council website that was uploaded to the council website in 2011, but was, it appears, approved in 1990. So we're trying to find the document. We can't find the approving report. But that policy statement has 3 parts to it. One is which align, we think, with what council want as part of this review, but that now requires just a little bit more work, because we will take that policy statement, try and break it down and bring it back to you saying we think you should consider this policy statement as the underlying sort of basis for why these positions exist, and whether do you want to change them, because there are, and we will circulate it, but we just can't find if it was ever approved by council. It happened pretty soon after amalgamation of the various councils, and I imagine, but we can't find it, we've got archives looking, that it was an amalgamation of the practices of the various boroughs in the city at the time, and so they came together and thought we need something, so a policy statement was developed then.
Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you. Just looking at that, the recognition of former mayors, will that include the discussion we've had previously, and haven't heard anything more about it, about the, whether to do paintings or not? Will that be a follow-up from that?
It's the follow-up that council asked us to do after the last report on it.
Are there any more questions? There being no more questions, I'm very happy to move that the committee notes the Civic Affairs Committee Forward Work Programme as shown in Attachment A. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Houlihan. Would anyone like to speak to the motion? Okay, I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? Abstentions? Thank you very much. I declare the motion is carried. Moving along to item 8, page 23 of our order papers, remits to the LGNZ AGM, requests for support. And again, Madam CEO is going to talk to the... Oh, and Ms Claire Sullivan, Principal Committee Advisor, will speak to the report.
So, councillors, there are 3 remits that you've been asked to seeking council support on. Since the paper was circulated on your agenda, staff have had time to consider each of them. And with the leave of the chair, I'll provide you with some advice on the staff position on each of them. I'll start with the virtual forum and with attendees of who are attending meetings virtually counting towards the quorum. That has always been the council's position that should be, in fact, the law. At the moment, it is the current situation because of the emergency legislation that goes until September 2024.
Yes.
And our view would be that is something council should continue to support. It's enabling of people being able to attend and count towards the quorum. And it's always been an anomaly that you could vote on something but not count towards the quorum. And it's a quirk of the Local Government Act, and so we think that this aligns with previous council submissions on that. So our advice would be that this aligns with council's position and it has over the years. The wellbeing remit, the staff, because you know that we are doing an amount of work on this, they advise that this requires some careful thought because it depends on where our wellbeing strategies end up, and they're not sure if the national concepts on wellbeing will align with what we want to do. And so until we better understand where we're getting to with our wellbeing statements, they say staff advises that we need some careful thought, and it's a 50-50 call in terms of the staff position depending on where council wants to go. So my sense is that it's probably too early to give you definitive advice on this because we haven't fully considered this as a council yet. That's that one. And then the KiwiSaver and remuneration one is more problematic. Well, we acknowledge that the incentives for people to be elected members are important, and remuneration and benefits as part of that. This potentially opens up a range of issues that have not been fully thought through because at the moment you are independent contractors. To make a change that would enable KiwiSaver and employer contributions would require a change to the ERA, but it also potentially then opens up all the other independent contractors that we have on the council books for the same T's and C's. So it would require very, very careful consideration, and the staff advice would be that there is real risk in supporting this in its current form. So I'm happy to take questions, but pretty much what I've said is all I know.
Thank you, Chief. Accept the advice on the virtual forums and the wellbeing. That's helpful to hear staff's advice. On the KiwiSaver remuneration, understand what you're saying, and sort of as an adjunct to the remit, do you see any other avenues for that?
There may well be other avenues. Staff haven't turned their minds to it, but our advice is recognising that you're trying to incentivise people wanting to stand and serve their communities, but we just don't think this is the right way of going.
And I don't see it as an incentivise. I see it as a reasonable expectation. But fair enough. Thank you.
Councillor Huleen.
Thank you. Obviously, one of the benefits of the KiwiSaver is, the employers, of which council isn't our employer because we're contractors, normally give a percentage, and so it's an incentive that they put in and the employer puts in. I assume that, that obviously would have to come out of probably rates that becomes extremely complicated. And you may not be able to answer this, but would it mean that if that went ahead, actually two questions, because if this went ahead and we vote against it, but say for some reason at a national level they get enough for that to pass, does that mean we have to implement it?
Look, there are too many ifs in that for me to answer, but anything that is enacted by way of a legislative change that is a national change, we're required to follow the law.
Would that mean if, say, that did go through, would that mean that we would then become employees instead of contractors?
There are way too many ifs in that one, I'm sorry, and so until you knew what laws changed and what effect it had, I just can't answer that.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions. So that says that the proposed remits to be considered at the AGM must have formal support from 5 councillors or at least one zone or sector group meeting prior to being submitted. So was there a deadline on when these submissions can be submitted?
Yeah, there is a deadline. Our feedback back to Hamilton City is required by Thursday, and they are required by the 19th to get them to LGNZ.
So I was fine with the first one, agree with the second one. The third one, the remit on wellbeing, I had thought this was actually a useful one. So there would be around, how many councils are there? Is it 67?
68 and four
sorry, dozens of councils all writing their interpretation of wellbeing. So I actually thought this was quite a useful one. I know that staff have done a lot of work on looking at different wellbeing. So when they read through this report, had they covered a similar sort of range of views like taituara, etc., in the work that they've done?
Do you mean in the work that the staff have done?
Yes, just given staff's position on defining the wellbeings when they've been spending time working it. I was wondering about the other 67 councillors that are probably all defining them as well.
Oh, sorry, all I can say is we've had a really short period of time to consider this. It arrived on the 11th of May. And so, and the advice from staff is, after a very quick reading, that a hasty decision, just needs to be considered as that, because at the minute there's the work the regional council are doing on regional wellbeings. We're doing our work on wellbeings separately, and so then you get national wellbeings. I guess their concern is we don't want to be diluted to the lowest common denominator if it's mandated differently and our aspirations are at a higher level than that. It's challenging. So they do say 50-50, but based on a quick review, because there simply hasn't been time. What I would say is all you're being asked for here is whether or not you want to be one of the 5 councils that supports the resolution to a point that it gets onto the agenda. It doesn't mean, and so if you're that, then you would probably be honour bound to vote to support it. Nothing stops you if this gets onto the agenda as a council taking a position that you then take forward to the AGM.
Yeah, I guess I'll just try. This is my first time, I guess. I know we've been through remits before, and it seems a kind of muddled process, and I don't really know how many of the remits that we have submitted on or agreed to what's happened to them. I think we had something this morning, didn't we, that said that oh no, that was yesterday, the Buildings Act, I think it was. So I don't think I should ask how effective these are. Is this the most important thing that we will be deciding around the wellbeings for this remit, or is it low on our level of significance?
I guess that's a decision for council, but we are trying to put remits in front of you in enough time that if council does want to be one of the 5 councils supporting them, that you have an opportunity. Today gave us that opportunity, but otherwise you'll simply get a report of all of the remits that are before that have made it onto the LGNZ agenda in a few weeks' time, where council will get to decide how they want to vote on those that make it to the agenda. This is your chance to...
Probably at your July meeting, by the timing, potentially.
Councillor Houlihan, followed by Councillor Walker, followed by Councillor Gary. And then Councillor Lucas.
Thank you. 2 questions. I did wonder when the remit was in the infrastructure meeting this morning, because this is a civic meeting, committee, I assumed that remits would be all in here, but are you going to allocate them to the committee that they're relevant to? Is that the way to work?
Today we were just conscious that we had both infrastructure and civic, and there was a very infrastructure specific resolution. In discussion with both chairs, we agreed that we would split them rather than have them all here, given that you had potentially 2 hours of community board discussions already on this agenda.
That's fine, thank you. And the second question is, could I ask that we take these remits separately, because there's some I agree with, some I don't, obviously. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. This is for the chief. So it is true, is it not, that the number of remits varies from year to year, and through COVID, I don't actually think there were many. I think the conference was postponed, wasn't it? One year we had, I think it was it 12 or even more, 20, extraordinary number. So it doesn't always mean that they get enough support to go onto the agenda, but we always get we often get a report, and then whatever happens with the vote at local government conference. That's correct, is it not?
That's my understanding, but I've never been through the vote part of the LGZ conference. I try not to go to that.
Councillor Walker, you were next, but thank you.
No problem, Madam Chair. And for the CEO, and feel free to just yes/no answer these. It is correct that well-being, like sustainability, literally has an endless number of potential meanings. Okay, or perhaps.
That's not a yes or no, but we know what the 4 well-beings are. So then how you frame them up is slightly different, but...
And leads on to my second question. Taituara, formerly Solgum, is the representation on that from all councils?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure when you say representation on that, what do you mean?
So would each one of the 67 local authorities have representatives who sit on, or is it
LGNZ, not Taituara?
I'm asking about Taituara, which was, am I right that it was formerly this Solgum?
Which is a membership organisation for staff that is structured entirely differently than LGNZ.
And would that membership consist of representatives from councils or not? Or is it totally separate from the council structure?
Membership on what? I'm sorry, that's the bit I don't get. So
I'll rephrase it. The definition from Taituara around well-being I quite like, and it's in the paper. So my question is, would many councils, because I'm assuming are you in Taituara? So similarly, would there be CEOs from other councils in that organisation, or is that just solely up to them?
So Taituara is a membership organisation who have staff. Staff develop some of these papers and circulate in various around their network for comment in the same way LGNZ does. But the board of Taituara has, I don't know if it has, it's got a selection of members of varying hierarchy.
You've answered the question because the answer is no. So, yeah. I did have another question, but it's slipped my mind. Can you come back to me? Great, thank you.
Thank you. Like Deputy Mayor Barker, I like the idea of having a nationwide definition of wellbeing, but I'm concerned about the timing of this because this obviously the remit goes to LGNZ in July, and do we not have to have our wellbeing strategies in place by next year? So if this remit then goes to the government asking them for them to determine a definition. So I'm just thinking we've done a lot of work by the time that this process happens. Was that correct?
Yeah, look, the remit, if successful, were it to get onto the LGNZ agenda, that's the first step. Then it needs to be voted on, second step, and then however the government then decides to implemented next step. So we're some way away. So we will still need, as a council, to develop our own regardless.
You almost read my mind because that was almost my question. The process of putting forward remits, it should never be assumed that, there's no way assumed that the remit will ever be progressed in any way. It simply remains a suggestion to potentially push forward something into policy at some point, hence, but may never happen. It might, of course.
It becomes, if a remit is successful, it becomes the LGNZ a policy position for them to advocate as an advocacy organisation. That's what happens.
But ultimately may go no further in terms of the government turning that into some policy somewhere down the line.
Correct.
Have we reached the end of questions? Okay. Given that, I'm very happy to move that the committee A, decides whether to support the remit on KiwiSaver and remuneration, B, decides whether to support the remit on virtual Cora, and C, decides whether to support the remit on wellbeing. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Walker. Yeah? I'm going to take them separately.
Vote on them separately, but do the debate in one?
Yeah. Okay. That's why I read them all out, because feel free to have your say on one or all of them, and then we'll take them separately. Are there any speakers to the motion? Deputy Mayor Barker, then Councillor Walker.
I disagree with A, the KiwiSaver remuneration, because when I looked at that, I thought that's terribly clunky. As contractors, difficult. Decides whether to support the remit on virtual forums. I thought absolutely, because we've all been through COVID and we know how hard that is. It seems sensible. And decides whether to support the remit and wellbeing. And I wish that the timing had come a lot earlier than this, because I know that a huge number of councils have spent a huge number of effort and staff, time, etc., trying to define what the government means by wellbeings. And that would be a good one, I think, to carry forward. Unfortunately, our timing doesn't quite work with it, but I do support that one.
Madam Chair, can I just have a minute?
Yep.
Sorry, excuse me, councillors.
Can I move? An adjournment?
Yes, please.
I will move that we take an adjournment. Thank you, Councillor Walker, for seconding. All those in favour of the adjournment, please say aye. Aye. Abstentions? Against? Thank you. Ms. Sullivan, for your guidance. As you can see, we've reworded the motion, make it sort of clearer as to where we stand or do not stand. Okay, is everyone clear? You happy, Councillor Walker? Oh, we're going to take the vote though. Oh, but I have to agree with the seconder has to agree with the mover, so I'm happy to change.
But also there is the case when I can second something and not support it, so it doesn't need to be. I'm happy to continue.
Thank you. Now it's your speech.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Madam Chair. And thank you to the CEO for bringing that late advice. And it did align with pretty much what I had written down last week when I read this. In terms of the first one, KiwiSaver, I mean, part of the argument was there was many barriers to prospective candidates, and I'd argue there's many barriers to prospective candidates that are far more important than this. Ageism, sexism and racism being three for starters. So it's way down the list of barriers for me, actually. And I also did think that 15 of us are charged with being in charge of a 1.5 billion 10-year planned budget, and I think that suggests to me that we're also capable of taking care of our own personal finances. So there's nothing that stops us from going out and making sure that we invest appropriately in the way that KiwiSaver would do for us. In terms of the audio-visual one, I'm glad this is on here. I simply wrote down here, my words are, if you can discuss and vote, you should be part of the quorum. Simple. So I have to say no more on that one. I think it's obvious, and I think there'll be broad support for that. The wellbeing one was far more difficult for me, to be honest. It's complicated, and I asked the questions around the Tai Tu Ara, and I like their definitions, but still that doesn't get over the hurdle for me that in terms of well-being, it's going to be different for everyone. Actually, it'd be very difficult coming up with well-beings that suit a city like ours with a large student population, as opposed to say the West Coast, that provides difficulties. And I'm glad we're doing work in that space. And I think, as has been suggested, this is just a little bit too soon for me to take a position on. So I'd either vote against it or, at the very minimum, abstain. Thank you.
Councillor Wiley.
Thank you. I agree with not supporting the remit on KiwiSaver remuneration. Inland revenue advice would be that if you're self-employed, that you make your own contributions. And KiwiSaver in the design was about those that are employees. And we all know where we stand, and we're all smart enough to make our own contributions. Support the remit on virtual quorums. I'm actually in two minds of this, as one being the fact that I think if you're away on council business or away or in the country, but from my experience, anytime you're zooming in or coming in from another side of the world, when there's a beach in front of you or something like that, you're really not totally engaged as you should be with council business. So I think when I look at, especially being overseas, that being there to make up the numbers or to make sure that you look good when it comes time to an election, to say that you attended 99 or 100% of the meetings, I think is actually not the right idea of supporting some of these things. And supporting the remit on wellbeing, I'm all for that.
Well, I'm only going to base the comment on B and Councillor Wiley's statement. And one of my experience was the Regional Transport Committee was going to have a meeting in Ranfield and it snowed, and we couldn't make the quorum. We all actually could have done it if we'd been able to do that. We'd have to deal with the recidivist councillor who's sitting on the beach all the time, but then we'd be asking whether they should even be voting at that point.
Councillor Houlihan?
Thank you. Yes, I'm thinking what exotic places I could go to zoom in now. No, so I agree with not supporting the KiwiSaver. I think there's too many, ifs with that, and so many questions that could have huge implications that aren't able to be answered. So that's the reason I won't be voting for that. And then with the support around the virtual, definitely I fully support that for the reasons that, well, certainly one that Councillor O'Malley made, but, COVID showed us that it is examples of that, you know, where we can still do our normal work, but also for me as a mother, you know, it means you can have a lot more flexibility in your job if you're able to Zoom in. I don't think we're looking for people to take advantage of it. Obviously, if people can come to meetings, I think the preference is that they be there. But in the case if you can't, say if you've got a sick child at home or something, what a great thing for women, particularly, obviously dads as well, but to have that flexibility can make a big difference and could mean that someone would stand for council when they might not have because of the fact they had that flexibility. So I'll fully support that. And I won't be supporting the remit on wellbeing for all the reasons Councillor Walker spoke about, because what I was just, you know, thinking when I read it was that our city has its unique things that are special, like every other city, but ours, of course, is the best in the world. And it is that, you know, we're a university city and that's unique to us. And we've got all these the heritage side of it. So there's so many different well-beings that are particular for our city that wouldn't probably be represented in a national, you know, some sort of nationally recognised statement. Thank you.
Are there any more speakers? Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the first one, I will support the motion, which says does not support the remit on KiwiSaver remuneration. However, I always recall the astonishment of my well-experienced accountant when I first was elected to council, and I think it's a reasonable expectation that there are KiwiSaver opportunities, but I understand this is not the pathway to get it. We seem to fall in all sorts of gaps, including the Health and Safety at Work Act and various others, and I don't think, I agree with Councillor Walker, I don't think it's a barrier to people standing at all. I think there's a whole lot more, as he suggested. But I just note that it's a reasonable expectation, although this isn't the way to go about it. So I'm happy to support what is up there in terms of wording. On the second one, there are all sorts of reasons why people can't come to a meeting, and speak for yourself, Councillor Wiley. And I take Councillor Houlihan's point, whether people have children or they're caregivers or whatever it is, it actually allows a greater diversity of people to stand for election for council and anticipate that. And we know that with COVID and having been through the global pandemic, that it is good that people stay at home when they're not well. And so I fully support that. On the final one, I'll be voting against that because of the timing, really. And I take the point that wellbeing for our community, we have a number of unique points of difference. Student population's been mentioned, our large number of visitors is another. There's all sorts of things that make our city unique, and many other places would say that as well. And I think that whatever definition we come up with will be suitable for our city, and so I'll be voting against that.
Are there any more speakers? Okay, I'm going to put it case by case, or motion by part. So that the committee A does not support the remit on KiwiSaver and remuneration. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Abstentions? Thank you very much. That the committee B supports the remit on virtual quorums. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Abstentions? Thank you very much. And then finally, that the committee C supports the remit on wellbeing. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Shall we take this by division? Show of hands. Aye. Aye. 4, is that right? Against? Abstention. An abstention. Thank you. That's the result.
It's
Sorry.
it's lost 4-6. Just lost on a show of hands. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. All right. And are we on to items for consideration by the chair? Are there any? All right. Thank you so much. This is the longest meeting we've had in a while. Oh, committee meeting anyway. So I'm just going to end firstly in Te Reo and then close us off with karakia timataka. Apiti hono tātai hono rātou te hokomate kia rātou. Tātou te hoka ora kia tātou. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. And basically I just acknowledged all those who have passed away and acknowledged us. And we'll go out with a if I can find the right app. That is Komene. I don't know how to stop this. Sorry. Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia ki te uru tapunui, kia wātea, kia māma, te kakai, te tinana, te wairo i te are takatū, ko ia rai roko, whakairia ake ki roka, kia tina, tina, huie, tai kie. Thank you. The meeting is declared closed at 3:43 p.m. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.